The fire that scarred Violet Vaughn's face and arms happened on her 18th birthday, turning what should have been a celebration into a nightmare that marked her forever. Now, 3 years later in the summer of 1872, she stood behind the counter of her father's general store in Clifton, Arizona Territory, watching customers flinch when they looked at her and listening to whispers that never quite stayed quiet enough. "Poor thing, Mrs. Henderson," said to her companion, loud enough for Violet to hear from across the store. "Such a shame about those scars. No man will ever want her now." Violet kept her eyes down, her fingers trembling slightly as she wrapped brown paper around a bundle of fabric. She had heard variations of this sentiment countless times since the fire. Her own mother had said something similar just last week, tears in her eyes as she touched Violet's face and mourned the daughter she once had. The scars stretched from her right cheek down her neck and across her shoulder, disappearing beneath her dress where they continued down her arm and side. The patterns were irregular, raised and pink against her pale skin, creating what looked like rivers branching across a landscape. She kept her hair long and often let it fall forward to hide as much as she could, but there was no hiding completely. "Miss Vaughn." A young boy approached the counter with a penny clutched in his small fist. "Can I have some candy?" Violet smiled at him, grateful for his innocent lack of judgment. Children rarely stared the way adults did. "Of course. Which kind would you like?" As she helped the boy select his candy, the bell above the door chimed. The store went suddenly quiet and Violet looked up to see why. A man stood in the doorway, and he was unlike anyone she had seen in Clifton before. He was massive, well over 6 feet tall with shoulders that seemed to fill the entire frame. His hair was dark and fell past his shoulders, tied back loosely with a strip of leather. His arms, visible beneath his rolled-up sleeves, were corded with muscle, and a thick beard covered much of his face. He wore buckskin pants and a worn shirt that strained across his broad chest. "Good afternoon," he said, his voice deep and rumbling like distant thunder. His eyes swept the store until they landed on Violet behind the counter. "I need supplies." "Of course, sir," Violet said, dropping the candy into the boy's eager hands before turning her attention to the mountain man. "What do you need?" He approached the counter with steady, confident steps. "Flour, salt, coffee, sugar, dried beans. Ammunition for a Winchester rifle. Rope, matches, and whatever fresh vegetables you might have." As Violet wrote down his list, she was acutely aware of him watching her. Most people either stared at her scars with morbid fascination or deliberately avoided looking at her face entirely. She could not tell which this stranger was doing, and it made her nervous. "I will gather everything for you," she said quietly, still not meeting his eyes. "It might take a few minutes. I've got time." While she moved around the store collecting his items, Violet could feel his gaze following her. Her hands shook slightly as she measured out flour into a cloth sack, and she nearly dropped the container of salt. When she returned to the counter with her arms full, he stepped forward to help her, his large hands taking the heaviest items from her before she could protest. "Thank you," she murmured, surprised by the gesture. "You are welcome." He studied the items she had gathered. "This looks good." "Do you have the ammunition?" "My father keeps it in the back. I will get him." "No need to trouble him. I trust you know how to handle it." Violet hesitated. Most men in town would never trust a woman to sell them ammunition, let alone one they considered damaged. "I do. How many boxes?" "3 should do." She retrieved the ammunition from the locked cabinet behind the counter, where her father kept the more valuable items. When she turned back, the mountain man was watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. His eyes were a startling gray like storm clouds, and they were focused directly on her face with no sign of disgust or pity. That everything?" he asked. "Unless you need anything else." "Actually," he paused, his expression thoughtful, "I could use some sugar candy if you have got any." Violet blinked in surprise. This enormous, rugged man wanted candy. "We have some. The same kind I just sold to the boy." "Perfect." As she added several pieces to his order, Violet found herself relaxing slightly. There was something steady and reassuring about his presence, despite his intimidating size. He did not rush her or show impatience as she tallied his bill, and when she quoted him the price, he counted out the money without haggling. "Are you passing through Clifton?" she asked, surprising herself with the question. She rarely initiated conversation with customers anymore. "Planning to stay for a while, actually. Got a claim up in the mountains I am working. Silver." "Oh, well, I hope you find what you are looking for." He gathered his supplies, muscles flexing beneath his shirt as he lifted the heavy sacks with ease. "I usually do. Name is Dalton Kane, by the way. Violet Vaughn. Pretty name." He nodded toward her. "I will be back in a week or so for more supplies." After he left, Mrs. Henderson immediately rushed to the counter. "Can you believe the size of that man? He looked positively wild. I heard there are men living up in those mountains who have gone half savage." Violet did not respond. She was still thinking about the way Dalton Kane had looked at her without flinching, without pity, as if her scars were just another part of her face. The week passed slowly. Violet helped her father in the store during the day and returned home each evening to the small house she shared with her parents. Her mother, Sarah, still treated her like fragile glass, constantly fussing over her and speaking in the careful, gentle tones one might use with an invalid. Her father, Robert, was kinder but distant, as if he did not quite know what to do with a daughter who would never marry. On Saturday afternoon, Dalton Kane returned. Violet was alone in the store, her father having gone to deal with a shipment at the warehouse. When the bell chimed and she saw who it was, her heart did an unexpected flutter. "Miss Vaughn," he greeted her, removing his hat. His hair was loose today, falling in dark waves around his face. "Good to see you again. Mr. Kane, do you need more supplies already?" "Some. But I also wanted to return this." He placed a clean cloth on the counter, and when he unwrapped it, Violet saw one of the store's measuring cups inside. "I accidentally took this with me last time. Must have gotten mixed in with my things." "Oh, thank you for bringing it back." Most people would not have bothered. "I am not most people." She could not argue with that. As she helped him gather another round of supplies, Dalton asked questions about the town, about her father's store, about life in Clifton. His questions were genuine, his interest real, and Violet found herself answering more openly than she had with anyone in months. "How long have you lived here?" he asked as she weighed out coffee beans. "My whole life. My parents moved here before the war when Clifton was barely more than a mining camp. It has grown a lot since then. Must be nice, having roots in a place. I have been drifting for years." "Where are you from originally?" "Montana Territory." "My father was a trapper, taught me everything about surviving in the mountains. After he died, I started prospecting. Seemed like the thing to do." Violet glanced at him. "Is it lonely? Living up in the mountains by yourself?" Dalton was quiet for a moment, his gray eyes studying her face. "Sometimes, but I prefer my own company to most people's. Present company excluded, of course." She felt heat rise to her cheeks and quickly turned away. "Your total is $4.30. As he counted out the money, his fingers brushed hers, and Violet jerked back instinctively. She had learned to avoid physical contact with people. It made them uncomfortable. But Dalton did not seem uncomfortable. He simply placed the coins in her palm and said, "Same time next week, if you need supplies." "I always need supplies." After he left, Violet realized she was smiling. It felt strange, the way her face moved into that expression. She had not smiled much in 3 years. True to his word, Dalton returned the following Saturday, and the Saturday after that. By the fourth visit, Violet found herself looking forward to his arrivals, preparing her father's inventory list early so she could be sure to be behind the counter when he came. On his fifth visit, he brought something with him. "I shot this buck yesterday," he said, placing a package wrapped in burlap on the counter. "Meat is too much for one person. Thought your family might like some." Violet stared at the package. "I cannot accept this. It is too generous. It will just go to waste otherwise. Besides, you have been kind to me. Let me return the favor." "I have only been doing my job." Dalton leaned against the counter, his massive frame somehow relaxed and open. "You have been more than that. You talk to me like I am a person, not just another customer. That means something." The sincerity in his voice made Violet's chest tighten. "Most people do not talk to me at all," she said quietly. "Not really, so I suppose we are even." His expression shifted, something fierce and protective flashing in his gray eyes. "Their loss." Before Violet could respond, her father emerged from the back room. Robert Vaughn was a tall, lean man with graying hair and a businessman's sharp gaze. He looked between Violet and Dalton with obvious curiosity. "Father, this is Dalton Kane," Violet said quickly. "He has a silver claim in the mountains. Mr. Kane, this is my father, Robert Vaughn." The two men shook hands, and Violet watched her father's expression carefully. Robert was protective of her, sometimes overly so, and she was not sure how he would react to a rough mountain man bringing gifts to his daughter. "Kane," Robert said, "I have heard about you. You are working the old Morrison claim, are you not?" "Yes, sir. Bought it from his widow last spring." "That is rough country up there. You managing all right on your own?" "I prefer it that way. I am not much for company." Robert's eyes flicked to Violet, then back to Dalton. "My daughter tells me you have been a regular customer. Your store has everything I need. And Miss Vaughn here is always helpful." There was something in the way Dalton said her name, with a warmth and respect that made it sound almost reverent. Violet busied herself with organizing the counter, but she could feel both men watching her. "Well, we appreciate your business," Robert said finally. "Violet, why don't you finish helping Mr. Kane while I go check on that shipment?" After her father left, an awkward silence fell. Violet focused on measuring out Dalton's usual supplies, but she was hyper-aware of his presence. "Your father seems like a good man," Dalton said. "He is. He has always taken care of me and my mother. He is protective of you." Violet's hand stilled on the flour sack. "He has reason to be, I am not exactly." She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. "Not exactly what?" "The kind of daughter who can take care of herself, or attract appropriate suitors, or do much of anything except work in a store and be a burden to my family." The words came out more bitterly than she intended. Violet pressed her lips together, wishing she could take them back. She never spoke about her feelings this openly. Dalton was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Turn around and look at me." Violet shook her head, keeping her face averted. "Please." Something in his voice, a gentleness she had not heard before, made her slowly turn to face him. He was leaning across the counter, close enough that she could see the flecks of darker gray in his eyes. "Who told you that you were a burden?" he asked. "Everyone. No one. It does not matter." "It matters to me." Violet's breath caught. Why would it matter to you?" Dalton held her gaze. "Because every Saturday for the past 5 weeks, I have looked forward to coming to this store. Not because I need supplies, though I do, but because I get to see you. Because talking to you is the best part of my week. And it makes me angry that someone made you believe you are anything less than remarkable." Tears pricked at Violet's eyes. She wanted to believe him, but 3 years of cruel words and pitying looks had built walls around her heart. "You do not know me, Mr. Kane. Then let me. Have dinner with me." "What dinner? Tomorrow evening. There is a restaurant in town, isn't there? Or we could take a walk by the river, whatever you would prefer." Violet stared at him in shock. "You are asking to court me." "I am asking to spend time with you." "If that leads to courting, I would be honored. But I am." She gestured helplessly at her face, at the scars that marked her. Dalton straightened up, his expression serious. "You are beautiful, and I would like to take you to dinner. People will talk. Let them talk." Violet's mind raced. Part of her wanted to say yes desperately, wanted to believe that this strong, kind man actually wanted to spend time with her. But another part, the part that had been hurt too many times, whispered warnings. "I need to think about it," she said finally. "Take all the time you need. I will be here next Saturday regardless." After he left, Violet stood behind the counter in a daze. Her father returned and asked if everything was all right, and she nodded mechanically. But nothing was all right. Everything had shifted, tilted on its axis, and she did not know which way was up anymore. That evening, she sat with her mother while Sarah mended clothes. Violet had always been close with her mother before the fire, but the accident had created a distance between them that neither seemed able to bridge. "Mother," Violet said carefully, "what would you think if someone wanted to court me?" Sarah's hand stilled on the shirt she was mending. "Has someone expressed interest? Perhaps. I am not sure." Her mother set down her sewing and looked at Violet with sad eyes. "Sweetheart, I do not want you to get your hopes up. Men can be cruel. They might show interest out of pity or curiosity, but it rarely means anything genuine." The words stung, even though Violet had expected them. "What if it is genuine? Then I would want you to be very careful. Your father and I worry about you. We do not want to see you hurt again." "I am already hurt, Mother. I hurt every day when people look at me like I am a monster or something to be pitied. At least if someone is cruel to my face, it would be honest." Sarah reached for her hand. "You are not a monster. You are my daughter and I love you. But you also think I am ruined. You said so yourself." "I said you were hurt. That is different." Violet pulled her hand away. "Is it? Because from where I am sitting, it feels exactly the same." She left before her mother could respond, retreating to her small bedroom at the back of the house. Through her window, she could see the mountains rising in the distance, dark silhouettes against the evening sky. Somewhere up there, Dalton Kane was in his cabin, perhaps thinking about her the way she was thinking about him, or perhaps not. Perhaps she had imagined the warmth in his voice, the sincerity in his eyes. Perhaps her loneliness had made her see things that were not there. But when Saturday came again, Dalton was back, and the first thing he said was, "Have you thought about my offer?" Violet had thought about little else all week. She had weighed every possible outcome, imagined every way it could go wrong. But she had also remembered the way he looked at her, without flinching, without pity, and that memory tipped the scales. "Yes," she said, "I will have dinner with you." The smile that broke across Dalton's bearded face was like sunshine breaking through storm clouds. "Tonight, I can pick you up at 6. I should probably tell my parents first, of course. Should I speak to your father?" The old-fashioned courtesy touched her. "That might be wise." Robert Vaughn was less enthusiastic about the arrangement than Dalton probably hoped. He questioned Dalton's intentions, his prospects, his character. But Dalton answered every question with patience and honesty, and eventually Robert gave his grudging permission for one dinner, properly chaperoned. "Your mother can accompany you," Robert said to Violet. "Father, I am 21 years old, and you are still my daughter. If Mr. Kane's intentions are honorable, he will not object to a chaperone." Dalton inclined his head. I have no objection, sir. I want to do this properly. So that evening, Violet found herself seated in the small restaurant on Clifton's Main Street. Her mother at a nearby table pretending not to watch while Dalton sat across from her, looking slightly out of place in clean clothes with his hair neatly tied back. I do not do this often, he admitted, gesturing at the restaurant. Eating in town, I mean, I am more comfortable in the mountains. I do not do this at all, Violet said. I have not had dinner out since before the fire. Tell me about it, the fire. Violet's hand instinctively went to her neck, tracing the edge of the scars. Why would you want to know about that? Because it is part of your story, and I want to know your story. No one had ever asked her directly about the fire. They gossiped about it, speculated about it, but no one had asked her. It was my 18th birthday, she began slowly. My mother was making a special dinner. The stove had been acting up for weeks, but my father kept saying he would fix it. That night, something went wrong with the oil lamp near the stove. It exploded. I was standing right there. The memory was still vivid, even 3 years later. The sudden burst of flame, the searing pain, her mother screaming. Her dress had caught fire and she had panicked, running instead of dropping and rolling like she should have. My father saved me, she continued. He tackled me, rolled me in a rug to put out the flames. But by then, the damage was done. The doctor said I was lucky to be alive. My mother said I was unlucky to be scarred. Dalton's jaw tightened. She said that to you, not in those exact words, but I heard her crying to my father one night. She said my life was ruined, that no man would ever want me, that she had lost her beautiful daughter. And you believed her. Everyone else did. Why should not I? Dalton leaned forward, his gray eyes intense. Because she was wrong. You are not ruined. You are not ugly. You are brave and strong and beautiful, and anyone who cannot see that is a fool. Violet's throat tightened. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you come to work every day even though people whisper about you. I know you are kind to children and patient with difficult customers. I know you have a sharp mind and a dry sense of humor. I know that when you smile, which is not often enough, it lights up the whole room. Dalton. And I know, he continued, his voice dropping lower, that your scars do not make you ugly. They make you interesting. They tell a story. They are like maps of where you have been, what you have survived. The words hit Violet like a physical blow. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. Everyone treated her scars like a tragedy, a disfigurement to be pitied or ignored. But Dalton spoke of them like they were something valuable, something worth seeing. Maps, she whispered. Yes. And I would like to learn to read them if you will let me. Violet looked down at her hands, trembling in her lap. I do not understand why you are doing this. Why me? Because from the moment I walked into your father's store, I felt something, a connection, a recognition. Like I had been looking for something all my life without knowing it, and there you were. That sounds like something from a dime novel. Dalton laughed, a deep, rumbling sound that made Violet's heart skip. Maybe, but it is true. I have never been good with fancy words or romance. I just know what I feel, and I feel something for you, Violet Vaughn. Across the restaurant, Sarah was watching with wide eyes. Violet knew her mother could not hear their conversation, but she could probably read the intensity in Dalton's posture, the emotion on Violet's face. This is crazy, Violet said. We have only known each other for a few weeks. Crazy does not mean wrong. What if it does? What if you wake up one day and realize that I am not what you thought I was, that my scars do bother you, or that I am too damaged, too broken? Dalton reached across the table and took her hand. His palm was rough, calloused from hard work, but his touch was gentle. Then I would be the one who is broken, not you. But that is not going to happen, Violet. I see you, really see you, and I like what I see. Violet let him hold her hand, feeling the warmth and strength of his touch. It had been so long since anyone had touched her with affection, without hesitation. She had forgotten what it felt like to be seen as something other than a victim or a tragedy. "I am scared," she admitted. "So am I. But I would rather be scared with you than safe and alone." They stayed at the restaurant for 2 hours, talking about everything and nothing. Dalton told her stories about his life in the mountains, about tracking game and reading weather patterns in the sky. Violet told him about growing up in Clifton, about books she loved and dreams she had once had of seeing the world beyond Arizona territory. When he finally walked her home, Sarah trailing behind at a discreet distance, Dalton paused at her door. "Can I see you again?" he asked. "Yes. Tomorrow. I work at the store until 6. I will pick you up at 6 then. We can take that walk by the river." Violet nodded, not trusting her voice. When Dalton smiled at her, his whole face transformed, and she realized that he was handsome beneath all that hair and beard. More than handsome. He was everything she had never let herself dream of. That night, lying in bed, Violet traced the scars on her arm with her fingertips. Maps, Dalton had called them. Beautiful maps. She had never thought of them that way before. They had only ever been ugly reminders of the worst day of her life. But maybe they could be something else. Maybe they could be proof that she had survived, that she was stronger than the fire that had tried to destroy her. Over the next weeks, Dalton courted Violet with a determination that left her breathless. He came to town almost every day, finding excuses to visit the store or to take her on walks. He met her parents properly, sat through awkward dinners where her mother fussed and her father interrogated. He was patient with her fears, gentle with her hesitations, and steadfast in his affection. The town gossips had a field day. Violet heard the whispers, saw the shocked looks. Some people thought Dalton was addled or taking advantage of her. Others thought it was a sick joke, that he would eventually reveal his true cruel intentions. But as days turned into weeks and Dalton's devotion never wavered, the gossip began to shift. "Maybe he really does care for her," Mrs. Henderson said one day, loud enough for Violet to hear. It was the kindest thing anyone had said about her in 3 years. 1 month after their first dinner, Dalton invited Violet to visit his claim in the mountains. Sarah was horrified by the suggestion, but Robert, who had been slowly warming to Dalton, gave his permission with strict instructions about proper behavior. "I will have her back before dark," Dalton promised. "You have my word." The ride up into the mountains was breathtaking. Violet had lived in Clifton her entire life, but had never ventured far into the rugged terrain that surrounded the town. Dalton led the way on his massive horse, with Violet following on a gentle mare he had borrowed from the livery. The landscape was harsh and beautiful, all red rock and scrubby vegetation, with the occasional pine tree clinging to impossible slopes. The summer heat was intense, but as they climbed higher, a breeze picked up, carrying the scent of juniper and sage. "It is incredible up here," Violet said as they paused at a ridge overlooking the valley below. Clifton looked tiny from this height, a collection of buildings clustered along the river. "This is my favorite view," Dalton said. "On clear days you can see for 50 miles. Do you get lonely, being up here by yourself all the time? I used to, before I met you." They continued up the trail until they reached a small cabin nestled in a grove of pines. It was rough but well built, with a stone chimney and a covered porch. Nearby, Violet could see the entrance to a mine shaft and various tools and equipment. "This is home," Dalton said, dismounting and helping Violet down from her horse. "It is not much, but it is mine." Inside, the cabin was surprisingly neat. A large bed dominated one corner, covered with fur pelts and wool blankets. There was a table with 2 chairs, a wood stove, shelves lined with supplies, and various personal items that gave Violet a glimpse into Dalton's solitary life. Books, mostly, which surprised her, and sketches, drawings of the mountains and wildlife, surprisingly skilled. "You draw," she said, picking up one of the sketches. "It passes the time, and it helps me remember things I have seen." Violet studied the drawings, touched by this glimpse of Dalton's artistic side. He seemed embarrassed by her attention, rubbing the back of his neck in a gesture she had come to recognize as a sign of his discomfort. "They are beautiful," she said. "You have real talent. I just draw what I see. That is what art is." Dalton started a fire in the stove and made coffee, strong and dark the way he preferred it. They sat on the porch, looking out at the mountains, and Violet felt a peace she had not experienced in years. Up here, away from town and its gossip, away from pitying looks and cruel whispers, she could just be herself. "I could stay here forever," she said without thinking. Dalton looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Could you really? It is a hard life up here, isolated, harsh winters. No neighbors for miles. But it is free, no one staring at you, no one whispering about you. No one should be whispering about you in the first place." Violet turned to face him. "But they do, they always will. In town, I will always be poor scarred Violet, the girl who is lucky anyone pays attention to her. But up here—" She trailed off, not sure how to finish. "Up here you could be just Violet," Dalton finished for her. "The woman I am falling in love with." The words hung in the air between them. This was the first time either had spoken the word love, though it had been hovering around them for weeks. "Falling in love," Violet repeated, her heart pounding. Dalton set down his coffee and turned to her fully. "I did not mean to say it like that. I wanted to wait to court you properly, to give you time. But yes, Violet, I am falling in love with you. I think I have been since the first day I saw you. That is impossible, you did not even know me." "I knew enough. I knew you were strong. I could see it in the way you held yourself, the way you did not let people's reactions break you. And I knew you were kind. I saw how you treated that little boy who came in for candy, how gentle you were with him." Violet's eyes filled with tears. "I do not know what to say." "You do not have to say anything. I just wanted you to know. I wanted you to understand that this is not a game for me, not some passing fancy. My feelings are real." "But why me?" The question burst out of her, raw and desperate. "You could have anyone. You are strong and capable and handsome. You could find a woman without scars, someone whole and undamaged. Why would you choose me?" Dalton stood up and pulled Violet to her feet. He was so much larger than her, but she did not feel intimidated. She felt protected, safe. "I am going to tell you something," he said, his voice low and intense. "And I need you to really hear me. Can you do that?" Violet nodded. "Your scars do not make you less. They do not make you damaged or broken or unworthy. They are part of you, part of your story, and your story is beautiful. Every mark on your skin is proof that you survived something terrible, that you are stronger than fire, stronger than pain, stronger than the cruel words people have thrown at you." He lifted his hand slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently touched her scarred cheek. His fingers traced the raised tissue with infinite care, following the patterns down her neck. "These are not ugly," he said softly. "They are beautiful maps, maps of your journey, maps of your courage, and I want to learn every line, every curve, every story they have to tell." Tears spilled down Violet's cheeks. No one had ever touched her scars like this, with reverence instead of pity. No one had ever called them beautiful. "Dalton," she whispered, "I love you, Violet Vaughn. I love your strength and your kindness and your sharp wit. I love the way you smile when you think no one is watching. I love the way you see the world. And yes, I love your scars because they are part of you, and there is nothing about you that I do not love. Violet could not speak. The words she wanted to say were caught in her throat, tangled up with 3 years of pain and self-loathing and loneliness. But she could show him. She could let her actions speak where her voice failed. She reached up and pulled his face down to hers, kissing him with all the emotion she could not express. Dalton made a sound of surprise and pleasure, his arms coming around her, pulling her close. The kiss was gentle at first, then deeper, more passionate. Violet felt like she was coming alive after years of being dormant, like spring returning after a long winter. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dalton pressed his forehead against hers. "I love you too," Violet said, the words finally breaking free. "I love you, Dalton Kane. I think I have loved you since you called my scars maps." They stood there on the porch, wrapped in each other's arms, while the sun began its descent toward the western horizon. Eventually, Dalton reminded her that they needed to head back before dark, but the promise of more time together, of a future together, hung in the air between them. The ride back to Clifton was quiet but comfortable. Violet felt lighter than she had in years, as if she had shed a heavy weight she had been carrying. When they reached her house, Dalton helped her dismount and walked her to the door. "Tomorrow?" he asked. "Tomorrow," she agreed. Robert was waiting inside, and Violet could tell from his expression that he had been worried. But when he saw her face, saw the happiness there, his features softened. "Did you have a nice time?" he asked. "Yes, Father, it was wonderful." That night at dinner, Sarah kept looking at Violet with a mixture of confusion and cautious hope. Finally, she asked, "Are you and Mr. Kane serious about each other?" "Yes, Mother, very serious." "But what about?" Sarah gestured vaguely at Violet's face. "What about my scars?" Violet said, her voice steady. "Dalton sees them differently than other people do. He sees them as part of who I am, not as something that makes me less." "That is a pretty sentiment," Sarah said carefully, "but marriage is about more than pretty sentiments. He has not asked me to marry him yet." "Yet?" Robert looked up sharply. "You think he will?" "I hope he will." Her parents exchanged glances, communicating in that silent way that couples who had been married for decades developed. Finally, Robert said, "If he makes you happy and if his intentions are honorable, then we will support you. But I want to have a serious conversation with him first. About his prospects, his plans for the future. He has a silver claim. He is working it himself. Silver mining is uncertain. Many men go bust. Dalton is not like many men." Robert smiled slightly. "No, I suppose he is not." The next weeks flew by in a blur of happiness. Dalton came to town almost every day, and when he could not come, he sent letters that Violet treasured. They were not flowery or poetic, but they were honest and heartfelt, and they made her feel valued in a way she never had before. 2 months after their first dinner, Dalton took Violet back up to his cabin. This time, he had a specific purpose. He had made dinner himself, a surprisingly good venison stew with fresh bread he had traded for in town. After they ate, he led her outside to watch the sunset. The sky was ablaze with color, orange and pink and purple streaking across the heavens. The mountains were silhouetted against the light, creating a landscape that looked almost unreal in its beauty. "I need to ask you something," Dalton said, taking both of Violet's hands in his. "But I want you to know that you can say no. If you are not ready, or if you have doubts, you can say no and I will wait. I will wait as long as you need me to." Violet's heart began to pound. "What are you asking?" Dalton took a deep breath, and for the first time since she had known him, he looked nervous. "I know we have not been courting long, only a couple of months. But I am older, I am 32, and I know what I want. I have spent years alone in these mountains, and I thought I was content. But then I met you, and I realized what I had been missing. You make me want things I never wanted before. A home, a family, a future." He dropped to one knee, still holding her hands, and Violet gasped, "Violet Vaughn, will you marry me? Will you come up to this mountain and build a life with me? I know it will not be easy. I know the winters are hard and the work is endless, but I promise I will spend every day trying to make you happy. I promise I will cherish you and protect you and remind you every single day how beautiful you are. So what do you say? Will you be my wife?" Tears streamed down Violet's face. 6 months ago, she had believed she would live her entire life alone, working in her father's store, watching from the sidelines as other people found love and happiness. She had accepted that her scars made her unlovable, that her future was small and limited. But Dalton had changed everything. He had seen past her scars, or rather, he had seen them and loved them as part of her. He had given her hope and possibility and a future she had never dared to imagine. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Yes, I will marry you. I will come to your mountain and build a life with you. I love you, Dalton." He stood up and lifted her off her feet, spinning her around while she laughed and cried at the same time. When he set her down, he kissed her thoroughly, and Violet felt like her heart might burst from happiness. He pulled a ring from his pocket, a simple gold band with a small stone set in it. "It is not much," he said, "but the stone is silver from my claim. I had the jeweler in town set it for me." "It is perfect," Violet said as he slid it onto her finger. "Everything is perfect." They stayed up on the mountain until well past dark, talking about their future. Dalton wanted to expand the cabin, add more rooms for the children they both hoped to have. Violet wanted to bring books and create a small garden. They made plans and dreamed dreams, and for the first time in 3 years, Violet felt like she had a future worth looking forward to. When Dalton finally took her home, very late and earning a stern look from Robert, Violet could not stop smiling. She showed her parents the ring, and even Sarah seemed caught up in the moment, hugging her daughter and crying happy tears. "When is the wedding?" Robert asked. "We have not set a date yet," Violet said, "but soon. We do not want to wait long." "There is so much to plan," Sarah said, already making mental lists. "We will need to make you a dress and arrange for a minister and prepare food for the guests. We want something simple, Mother, just family and close friends. But everyone will want to come." It is not every day that a wedding happens in Clifton. Violet and Dalton exchanged glances. They both knew what Sarah was not saying. The town would turn out not because they cared about Violet's happiness, but because they were curious. They wanted to see the scarred girl marrying the wild mountain man. They wanted something to gossip about. "I do not care what people think," Violet said firmly. "This wedding is for us, not for them." In the end, they compromised. They would have a small ceremony at the church with a reception at the store. Sarah would make Violet's dress, and Robert would handle the logistics. The date was set for 6 weeks away, in early October when the weather would be cooler. The engagement period was both wonderful and challenging. Violet was blissfully happy with Dalton, but the town's reaction was mixed. Some people were genuinely happy for her. Others were skeptical or disapproving, and a few were openly cruel. "He must be desperate," Violet overheard one woman say. "No real man would choose someone so damaged." The words stung, but they did not break her the way they once would have. Because every time doubt crept in, Dalton was there to chase it away. He continued to court her attentively, bringing her flowers from the mountain meadows and small gifts he carved himself. He attended church with her family, sat through endless dinners with relatives, and charmed even her most skeptical aunts and uncles. And every chance he got, he touched her scars. Not in a way that drew attention, but in small, intimate gestures. His fingers tracing the marks on her hand as they walked, his palm resting against her scarred shoulder, his lips brushing the damaged skin on her neck when he kissed her goodnight. "You are doing it again," Violet said one evening as they sat on her parents' porch. "Doing what?" "Touching my scars," Dalton smiled. "I cannot help it. They are beautiful. You are beautiful." "I do not think I will ever get used to hearing that." "Good, because I plan to tell you every day for the rest of our lives." 2 weeks before the wedding, disaster struck. A late summer storm rolled through the mountains, bringing torrential rain and flash floods. The river that ran through Clifton swelled beyond its banks, threatening several buildings including the church where they were supposed to be married. Dalton came to town to help with the emergency efforts, using his strength to move sandbags and rescue stranded animals. Violet worked alongside him, ignoring her mother's protests that it was not appropriate for a bride to be doing manual labor. The crisis brought the town together, and Violet found herself working side by side with people who had previously avoided her. "Thank you," Mrs. Henderson said at one point, after Violet helped her move supplies to higher ground. "I know I have not always been kind to you, but I appreciate your help now." It was not an apology, but it was something. An acknowledgement, a beginning. The flood damage to the church meant they needed a new location for the wedding. Dalton suggested they marry on the mountain, at his cabin, and Violet agreed immediately. It felt right, somehow, to start their married life at the place that would become their home. On the morning of her wedding day, Violet woke early. Her mother came to her room with the dress she had spent weeks making, a beautiful creation of cream-colored silk with lace trim. It had long sleeves to cover Violet's scarred arms and a high neck for the same purpose. "Mother," Violet said carefully, "I do not want to cover my scars today." Sarah looked shocked. "But everyone will see them, I know." "But Dalton loves them. He calls them beautiful maps, and if I am going to start my married life, I want to do it honestly. No more hiding. No more shame." Her mother was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "You have become so strong." "When did that happen?" "I have always been strong. I just needed someone to remind me." Sarah hugged her daughter tightly. "Then we will alter the dress, short sleeves, a lower neckline, let them see. Let everyone see how beautiful you are." The ceremony took place on the mountain in the late afternoon. It was a small gathering, just immediate family and a few close friends who made the trek up the trail. The minister from town officiated, reading passages about love and commitment while Violet and Dalton stood beneath a canopy of pine branches. Violet wore her altered dress, her scars visible for everyone to see. She held a bouquet of wildflowers that Dalton had picked that morning. And when the minister asked if she would take this man to be her husband, she said yes with all the conviction in her heart. Dalton's vows were simple but powerful. "I promise to love you every day, to honor you and cherish you, to see your beauty when you cannot see it yourself, to trace every map on your skin and thank God for bringing you to me. You are my home, Violet, and I will spend my life making sure you always feel safe in my arms." Violet's vows were equally heartfelt. "You gave me back my life when I thought it was over. You taught me that scars do not define us, that we are more than what has been done to us. I promise to love you with everything I am, to build a home with you in these mountains, to be your partner in all things. You are my miracle, Dalton. And I will never stop being grateful that you walked into my father's store." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Dalton kissed her tenderly, his large hands cradling her scarred face with infinite gentleness. The small gathering applauded, and Violet heard her mother crying happy tears. The reception was held on the porch of the cabin, with food that Sarah and the other women had prepared. It was simple but joyful, filled with laughter and music as someone produced a fiddle and played dancing tunes. Dalton swung Violet around the porch, her feet barely touching the ground, while she laughed with pure happiness. As the sun set, and the guests began to make their way back down the mountain, Robert pulled Dalton aside for a private conversation. "Take care of my daughter," he said, his voice gruff with emotion. "I will, sir, I promise you that. She is stronger than people think, stronger than even she knows sometimes, but she has been hurt, badly, so be patient with her, be kind. Always." Robert nodded, seemingly satisfied. Then he surprised both Dalton and Violet by pulling them both into a hug. "Be happy," he said. "That is all I have ever wanted for you." After everyone left, Violet and Dalton stood on the porch, looking out at the darkening mountains. The cabin was theirs now, truly theirs, a place to build their life together. "Are you tired?" Dalton asked, his arm around her waist. "No, too happy to be tired." "Good, because I have something to show you." He led her inside where he had prepared the cabin for their wedding night. Candles flickered throughout the space, casting a warm golden glow. The bed was made up with fresh linens and soft furs, and on the table sat a leather-bound book. "What is this?" Violet asked, picking it up. "Open it." Inside she found drawings, page after page of sketches, all of her. Some showed her working in the store, others captured quiet moments she had not known he was observing, and in each drawing her scars were visible, rendered with careful detail and obvious care. "You drew me," she whispered. "Many times. I told you your scars are like maps. I wanted to learn every line, every curve, and I wanted you to see yourself the way I see you, beautiful, perfect, exactly as you should be." Violet turned page after page, tears streaming down her face. No one had ever given her a gift like this, something that so clearly showed how much she was valued, how carefully she was seen. "Thank you," she said, her voice breaking. "Thank you for seeing me." Dalton pulled her into his arms. "I will always see you, Violet Kane. Every day for the rest of our lives. I will see you and love you and remind you how extraordinary you are." That night, as they lay together in their marriage bed, Dalton kept his promise. He traced every scar with his fingers and his lips, telling her the stories he imagined each one held. He called them beautiful, called her beautiful, with such conviction that Violet finally began to believe it. The first year of their marriage was an adjustment. Life on the mountain was harder than Violet had expected. The work was constant and exhausting. Water had to be hauled from the creek. Wood had to be chopped for the stove. The garden she planted required endless weeding and watering. And the isolation, while sometimes welcome, could also be overwhelming. But through it all, Dalton was beside her. He taught her how to shoot so she could protect herself when he was working the mine. He showed her how to read the weather and track animals. He built her bookshelves for the growing collection of volumes she brought from town. And every night, no matter how tired they both were, he held her close and reminded her that she was loved. The mine began producing well. Not a massive strike that would make them rich, but steady finds that provided a comfortable income. Dalton hired 2 men to help with the heavy work, which allowed him more time at the cabin with Violet. They talked about expanding, maybe buying more land, maybe raising cattle in addition to mining. In the spring, Violet discovered she was pregnant. She told Dalton one evening after dinner, her heart pounding with nervousness and excitement. They had talked about children, had hoped for them, but the reality was both thrilling and terrifying. Dalton's reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing and crying at the same time. Then he set her down carefully as if she were suddenly made of glass. "Are you happy?" she asked. "I am beyond happy. I am blessed. We are going to have a family, Violet." The pregnancy was difficult. The mountain altitude and the physical demands of their life took a toll. Violet was frequently ill and exhausted. Her mother came to stay for several weeks, helping with the household tasks and fussing over her daughter in the way only mothers can. Sarah had changed over the past year. She no longer looked at Violet with pity or sadness. Instead, she saw a strong woman who had built a good life for herself against all odds. The two women grew closer during those weeks, healing some of the wounds that the fire had created between them. On a cold January day in 1874, Violet gave birth to a son. The labor was long and painful, attended by Sarah and a midwife from town. Dalton paced outside in the snow, going half mad with worry every time he heard Violet cry out. But when it was over, when the baby's first wail split the air, he rushed inside to find Violet exhausted but smiling, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. "We have a son," she said, her voice weak but triumphant. "A healthy, perfect son." Dalton looked at the baby, at this small miracle they had created together, and tears streamed down his bearded face. What should we name him? They had discussed names but had not settled on one. Now, looking at her son's tiny features, Violet knew exactly what to call him. "Thomas," she said. "After your father, Thomas Kane." "Are you sure?" "I am sure. Your father taught you how to survive in the mountains, how to be strong and capable and good. I want our son to carry that legacy." Dalton kissed her forehead, then gently touched the baby's cheek. "Thank you," he whispered. "For him. For everything. You have given me a life I never dreamed possible." Young Thomas thrived despite the harsh mountain environment. He was a happy, healthy baby with his father's gray eyes and his mother's determined spirit. Violet discovered that she loved being a mother, loved the routine of caring for her son and watching him grow and change. Dalton was an attentive father, constantly holding and playing with Thomas. He carved toys for the baby and sang him songs in a surprisingly gentle voice. And he insisted on helping with all the tasks of childcare, refusing to see it as just women's work. "He is our son," he said, when Violet protested that changing diapers was beneath him. "Nothing about caring for him is beneath me." When Thomas was 6 months old, they took him to town to show him off. The reception was warmer than Violet expected. People who had once whispered about her now commented on what a beautiful family she had. Mrs. Henderson even held the baby and proclaimed him perfect. "You look happy," the older woman said to Violet. "Truly happy." "I am," Violet replied. And it was true. Despite the hardships, despite the scars she would carry forever, despite everything, she was genuinely, deeply happy. The years passed in a blur of work and joy. Thomas grew into a lively toddler, then a curious little boy. Violet gave birth to a daughter they named Grace when Thomas was 3, and then another son, Daniel, 2 years after that. The cabin was expanded multiple times, growing from a single room into a proper house with separate bedrooms and even a small parlor. The mine continued to produce well. Dalton and his workers found a significant silver vein when Thomas was 5, which provided enough income to make real improvements to their property. They bought cattle and hired a hand to help manage them. They built a barn and a proper chicken coop. They even installed glass windows, a luxury that made the house feel almost refined. Through it all, Dalton never stopped tracing Violet's scars and calling them beautiful. It became a ritual between them, a private language of love. He would touch the marks on her skin and tell her stories about the life they had built, the adventures they had shared, the love they had created. And Violet, who had once believed herself unlovable, learned to see herself through his eyes. Learned that beauty was not about unmarked skin or perfect features. Learned that she was strong and valuable and worthy of love, scars and all. When Thomas was 10, he asked his mother about her scars for the first time. They were sitting on the porch, watching Grace and Daniel play in the yard, and he had been studying her face with the intensity only children possess. "Mama, where did you get your scars?" Violet had known this question would come eventually. She had prepared for it, thought about how to answer. But sitting there with her son's innocent gaze on her, the words came more easily than she expected. "I was hurt in a fire when I was younger. It was very painful and it left these marks on my skin." "Does it still hurt?" "No, sweetheart, not anymore. Some kids in town say mean things about them. They say you look scary." Violet's heart clenched. She had hoped her children would be spared the cruelty she had experienced, but she knew that was probably naive. "What do you think?" she asked. Thomas considered the question seriously. "I think they look like rivers, like the maps Papa draws of the mountains, and I think people who say mean things are silly. You are the best mama ever." Violet pulled him close, fighting back tears. "And you are the best son ever." That evening she told Dalton about the conversation. He was angry at first, wanting to confront the parents of the children who had said cruel things. But Violet talked him down, reminding him that they could not fight every battle for their children. "Thomas handled it well," she said. "He called my scars rivers. He sees them the way you do." "Of course he does. We have taught him to see beauty in unconventional places. I just worry. What if the other children are cruel to him because of me? What if my scars make life harder for our children?" Dalton cupped her face in his hands, his gray eyes intense. "Our children are lucky to have you as a mother. You have taught them strength and resilience and kindness. Anyone who cannot see that is a fool, and I will not have you taking on their ignorance as your burden. Do you understand me?" Violet nodded, letting his conviction bolster her own flagging confidence. After 15 years together, he still had the power to make her feel cherished and valuable. As the children grew, the Kane family became a fixture in Clifton's community. Dalton was respected for his hard work and fair dealing. Violet was known for her kindness and her sharp business sense when she helped Dalton negotiate with ore buyers. Their children were well-mannered and bright, a credit to their parents. The whispers about Violet's scars never completely stopped, but they became less frequent and less cruel. Some people even began to see her as an inspiration, a woman who had overcome tragedy and built a beautiful life. Young girls who had been hurt or scarred sometimes sought her out, asking for advice or just wanting to see proof that they could have futures too. Violet always made time for these girls. She would sit with them, let them see her scars up close, and tell them honestly about the hard years after the fire. But she would also tell them about Dalton, about how love had healed her in ways medicine never could. About how she had learned that she was more than her scars, more than what had been done to her. "You are not broken," she would tell them. "You are a survivor, and that makes you strong." On their 15th wedding anniversary, Dalton surprised Violet with a trip. He arranged for her parents to watch the children for a week, and then he took her back to the spot where they had first met, back to her father's store in Clifton. The store had been sold years ago when Robert retired, but the new owners allowed them to stand inside for a few minutes, to remember where it all began. "I was so nervous that first day," Dalton admitted as they stood by the old counter. "I had seen you in town a few times before I worked up the courage to come in. You had seen me before, several times, and every time I thought you were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen, but I could tell you had been hurt. I could see it in the way you held yourself, the way you avoided eye contact, so I waited until I could think of a good reason to talk to you. You needed supplies. I always need supplies, but that day I needed courage more. I needed to know if what I felt when I saw you was real or just wishful thinking." Violet leaned against him, fitting perfectly into his side the way she always had. And was it real? More real than I could have imagined. You changed my life, Violet. You made me better. You gave me everything I never knew I wanted. You saved my life, Violet said softly. I was drowning in my own pain and fear. I had given up on everything. And then you walked in and saw me, really saw me, and you told me I was beautiful. You told me my scars were maps, and you meant it. I still mean it. He tilted her face up to his. Every word. They left the store and walked through Clifton, visiting old haunts and reminiscing about their early courtship. The town had grown significantly in the years since their wedding. New buildings lined the streets, and the population had nearly doubled as more mining operations opened in the surrounding mountains. That evening, they had dinner at the same restaurant where they had shared their first meal together. Sarah and Robert joined them, older now but still healthy and active. They toasted the anniversary and shared stories about the past 15 years. I was not sure about you at first, Robert admitted to Dalton. You seemed wild and unpredictable, but you proved me wrong. You have been a good husband to my daughter and a good father to my grandchildren. I had good incentive, Dalton replied, smiling at Violet. Your daughter is an exceptional woman. Sarah reached across the table and took Violet's hand. I owe you an apology, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I said terrible things to you after the fire. I made you believe you were ruined, that your life was over. I was wrong, and I am so sorry. Violet squeezed her mother's hand. You were scared, we both were, but we got through it. You got through it. You found the strength to heal and to love and to build this beautiful life. I am so proud of you. The evening was filled with laughter and tears, with memories both painful and joyful. By the time they said good night, Violet felt like she had finally, truly put the past to rest. The fire would always be part of her story, but it no longer defined her. She was so much more than her scars. The years continued to pass. Thomas grew into a young man who inherited his father's love of the mountains and his mother's sharp mind. He went to school in Clifton, but always came home to help with the mine and the cattle. Grace was spirited and artistic, filling the house with drawings and music. Daniel was quieter, thoughtful, with a deep love for books that reminded Violet of herself at that age. Violet and Dalton grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. They faced hardships, as all families do. There were lean years when the mine produced little. There were illnesses and injuries. There was grief when Robert passed away suddenly when he was 72, and again when Sarah followed him just 2 years later. But through it all, they had each other. Dalton was Violet's rock, her safe harbor, her greatest love. And she was his home, his heart, his everything. On their 25th anniversary, their children threw them a party. Friends and family filled the expanded house, spilling out onto the porch and into the yard. There was food and music and dancing. People came from all over the territory to celebrate with them. Late in the evening, after most of the guests had left, Violet and Dalton sat together on the porch swing, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. The night was warm and still, filled with the sounds of crickets and the distant call of an owl. 25 years, Violet mused. Sometimes it feels like forever. Sometimes it feels like yesterday. You have any regrets? Dalton asked. Violet thought about the question carefully. She thought about the fire, about the scars that still marked her skin, about the pain and the fear and the years she had spent believing she was unlovable, about all the things she had missed out on, all the experiences she would never have because she was different. But then she thought about Dalton, about the life they had built together in these mountains, about their children and their home and the deep, abiding love that sustained her every day, about the way he still traced her scars and called them beautiful, 25 years after the first time he had done so. "No," she said finally. "I have no regrets. If I had to go through everything again, every painful moment, every cruel word, every dark day just to end up here with you, I would do it in a heartbeat." Dalton pulled her close, his arms strong and sure around her. "I love you, Violet Kane. I have loved you from the first moment I saw you, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond. And I love you. You taught me that I was beautiful, that my scars did not define me. You gave me back my life." "No," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You gave me mine." They sat together in the gathering darkness. Two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built something beautiful out of pain and fear and love. The mountains rose around them, ancient and eternal, witnesses to their story. Inside the house, they could hear their children cleaning up after the party, their voices and laughter drifting through the windows. This was home. This was family. This was the life they had created together. And Violet's scars, those maps that traced across her skin, told the story of where she had been and how far she had come. They were proof of her strength, her survival, her capacity to heal and grow and love. They were beautiful, just as Dalton had always said. Not despite being scars, but because of what they represented. As the last light faded from the sky and the stars emerged in their full glory, Violet felt a peace settle over her that she had not known was possible all those years ago. She had survived the fire. She had survived the cruelty and the fear and the loneliness. And on the other side of all that pain, she had found something precious beyond measure. She had found love. She had found home. She had found herself. And that, she thought, was the most beautiful map of all. A map that showed not where you had been wounded, but where you had healed. Not what had been done to you, but what you had made of yourself in spite of it. Not the darkness you had endured, but the light you had found on the other side. Dalton's hand found hers in the darkness, his fingers intertwining with hers in the familiar way they had done thousands of times before. And Violet smiled, content in the knowledge that she was loved completely, scars and all. The mountain air was cool and clean, carrying the scent of pine and sage. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled and others answered, their wild voices echoing across the valleys. It was a sound Violet had learned to love, a reminder that this harsh, beautiful land was now her home. "Tell me a story," she said to Dalton, the way she had done countless times over their years together. "What kind of story? A true one, about us." Dalton was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he began to speak, his deep voice rumbling in the darkness. "Once there was a mountain man who thought he knew what life was. He thought it was about surviving, about enduring, about being strong enough to face whatever came. He lived alone in the wilderness, content with his solitude, never understanding what he was missing." He paused, his thumb rubbing gentle circles on the back of Violet's hand. Then one day he walked into a store in a small town, and he saw a woman. She was trying to hide, trying to make herself invisible, because people had told her she was ugly. They had told her that the scars on her face and arms made her unworthy of love. But the mountain man did not see ugliness. He saw beauty. He saw strength. He saw someone who had survived something terrible and kept going anyway. Violet leaned her head against his shoulder, listening. So he spoke to her, and then he spoke to her again, and again. And slowly, she began to believe him when he told her she was beautiful. She began to see herself the way he saw her, and together they built a life more wonderful than either of them could have imagined. They had children and grew old and loved each other through everything, and the mountain man learned that he had been wrong. Life was not just about surviving. It was about finding someone to survive with, someone to love, someone to build dreams with. Is that how the story ends? Violet asked softly. No, Dalton said, kissing the top of her head. "That is how it begins. The story never really ends because every day with you is a new chapter. Every morning I wake up beside you is the start of a new adventure. And I want to keep writing this story with you for as long as we both shall live." Violet tilted her face up to his, and even in the darkness she could see the love in his eyes. "Then let us keep writing it, you and me, always." "Always," he agreed, and kissed her the way he had kissed her on their wedding day, with passion and tenderness and promise. The stars wheeled overhead, ancient and uncaring as they had for millennia and would for millennia more. But in that moment, under that vast sky, two people held each other close and celebrated the love they had found against all odds. A love that had transformed pain into beauty, scars into maps, loneliness into belonging. And in the end, that was all that mattered. Not the fire that had marked Violet, not the years she had spent believing herself unlovable, not the cruel words or pitying looks. What mattered was this: she had survived, she had healed, and she had found someone who loved every part of her, including the parts she had once hated. Dalton Kane had seen her scars as beautiful maps, and in doing so had shown her the way home. Home to herself, home to love, home to a future she had never dared to dream of, and that was the greatest gift anyone could give. Not the erasure of pain, but the transformation of it. Not the denial of scars, but the recognition of them as marks of survival, of strength, of a journey worth taking. As they sat together on that porch, surrounded by the wild beauty of the Arizona mountains, Violet Vaughn Kane knew that she was exactly where she was meant to be. With the man who had taught her that love was not about perfection, but about seeing someone truly and loving them anyway. With the family they had created together. With the life they had built from hope and determination and faith in each other, her scars would always be there. They would fade with time, but they would never disappear completely. And she no longer wanted them to. They were part of her story, part of her journey. They were the maps that had led her here, to this moment, to this love, to this life. And they were, just as Dalton had always said, beautiful.